Well, hello. It is another Feisty Fridays, and I'm in a hotel room this week. I've been traveling on the road, doing some PMI conference hopping. It's been amazing. But I wanted to jump on here and talk to you about what I've been thinking about this week. And that is that our leadership conversation, where last week we talked about clarity and certainty. And I've been sort of spinning towards that. This week, I really want to talk about alignment. Alignment in particular, because I think a lot of time alignment is actually not agreement. So I want to ask you a question. If your team needs unanimous agreement before moving forward, you're not leading, my friend. Because leadership is not about unanimous agreement. I would say if you find yourself in that position, you're actually negotiating comfort. And that's not leadership. Because honestly, a lot of organizations, a lot of people that I work with right now are stuck because they're expecting everyone to agree. And I get it. We want it. It makes sense. Agreement feels like we are recognizing, hearing, and listening to everyone. But I really think that leadership right now has disconnected from the understanding that sometimes it isn't about every voice in the room agreeing. Sometimes, after we have heard, seen, and valued everyone's contribution, it's important for us to not continue to confuse alignment with agreement. Because leadership sometimes requires us to not slow down, not overprocess everything, and not exhaust ourselves by trying to make sure everyone feels fully comfortable. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't create psychological safety because you know how I feel about that. This is what happens beyond that. This is not hosting another meeting. This is not having another discussion. This is not engaging in another reframing conversation. And it's not because you haven't done those things. It's because in leadership, there's a thing called momentum. And when we begin to socialize in meetings with great thoughts and ideas, there comes a time where it's important to act. And like I said, you know how I feel about psychological safety. I don't just believe in it. I think it's absolutely the cornerstone of how we create inclusive dialogue. I believe, nope, I know that people deserve to be heard. The people that you work with on your projects, they deserve to be heard because their unique vantage point is exactly that. It's unique and you need to hear it. But as a leader, you need to be careful that you don't create an ongoing stabilization exercise by continuing to engage those things. And I think some organizations, not all, but some organizations are drifting in this area because leaders are afraid of a few things. And these are genuine things to be afraid of. We're afraid of conflict. Some of us have already been through it and we just want to move on, but we don't want to incite more. We also are afraid of pushback. We're afraid of, well, good old fashioned being disliked, or even more so being misunderstood. But leadership isn't a comfortable place. And I think when we hesitate to move forward, sometimes we disable the momentum and we discourage the team. You know, leadership isn't about unanimous emotional agreement. Leadership does warrant sometimes where we just have to make a decision. And that decision needs to be a coordinated movement, but there can still be disagreement. In fact, I think that is a higher calling to move the mission forward, even recognizing that not everyone agrees. Because it's important to understand that agreement is something that is emotional in humans. But alignment is operational. So we don't excuse or dismiss emotions because they're valid, they're important, and they're what make individuals on your team unique. But alignment is sometimes necessary at an operational level. Agreement says, I personally support or prefer this decision. And that sounds good, but an alignment statement says, I understand the direction, the expectations, and my role within it. Notice that alignment statement is not about how you feel about it emotionally. It's about submitting and recognizing that sometimes we do need to move. And those are very different things. Mature teams that have worked together for a long time or have built psychological safety, do you know what? They can disagree and still make decisions collectively. They can still move professionally in alignment because they can submit to one another because they have trust. And that's what strong organizations do. And that's what strong leaders have the ability to also do. But I've done this wrong. I've been a leader that's chased consensus because in those moments, chasing agreement instead of alignment felt safe. The problem is my leadership in those moments often was watered down. My decisions softened. And my greatest disadvantage, I would say, as a leader, is that my language tends to become vague. And we know when we have vague language, that means our interest holder expectations can get blurry, and miscommunication is the biggest derailer of project success. Suddenly we find ourselves, I have found myself as a leader where I don't know who owns what. I don't know where the organization actually is going, where the emotions of the room are being felt, and also what those emotions are informing in the behavior of the team. And the irony is there's nothing wrong with those moments. It's just that I recognize in hindsight that leadership is a bigger call. Leadership bends trying to keep people happy because less confident people actually create less confident teams invested in leadership, and we can't afford that. Certainty, uncertainty, change. Eventually, with the rooms we're working in right now, we need stability. We do need to value what we can know and what we can understand about each other. And when we have psychological safe environments, when we create trust and respect, mutual respect, we need to then step forward and ask ourselves, we don't have to have consensus, but we can have alignment. Alignment doesn't mean silence. This doesn't mean that everyone in the meeting says, yeah, it's fine. No, it's not fine. Say, I've told you how I feel. You know that I don't agree with this, but I recognize we need to make a decision. It doesn't have to be that people lose their voices. In fact, poor leadership eradicates those voices. Healthy leadership creates space for that, even when we still have to move. And that part matters because when people are able to surface concerns, when they're able to explore perspectives, and when they're able to challenge assumptions about the decisions we're making as leaders, that's healthy. It means we're looking to our right and to our left and factoring in the things that, well, we may not see ourselves. But once a direction is established as alignment, aligned teams need to commit to those decisions. And we do it not because we get exactly what we wanted. In fact, I'm going to go and be bold here. I'm going to say, if you continue, I will make it about me. So it's personal. If I, Amber, as a leader, continue to need everyone to 100% agree, I demonstrate in that moment immature leadership. Because everyone getting exactly what they want is not leadership. In fact, we can't even build great teams if that's what we value, if that's what we put forward. Organizational maturity requires movement in the absence of that. And that maturity is where, you know what? You know how many times I've been wrong? You know how many times I have thought my decision was the right one, only to discover that, no, it wasn't necessarily. So we need to be able to commit and trust one another to take those, moments of discomfort and be okay with them. To recognize that leadership is emotional, and at the same time, it calls us to making directional decisions sometimes. All of us want certainty. All of us want validation. All of us want agreement. But when we can't have it, we have to recognize that trying to consistently eliminate the discomfort of not having it isn't leadership. We need to, in our actions and in our commitment, help people move through discomfort without losing overall direction and alignment. I really do believe that's the work. And like I said, I can only speak about this because I've sucked at it. I continue to suck at it. And yet my observation of it is that I can do better. Because leadership is actually not the art of getting everyone to feel the same thing. That's magic. Leadership is the discipline of helping people move forward together in spite of the discomfort and to move anyway. And if your organization right now can't tolerate disagreement without destabilizing the room and making everything feel unsafe, I will tell you, I don't think you have an alignment problem. I think you have a discomfort tolerance problem. And that's a subject for another Feisty Fridays. We'll see you then.